Okay, for this last section here, this is more factoring, and so this is where it gets into bigger coefficients to start with, which, like I said, is a little bit harder. If it's not a 1 or a prime number or small number, it's a little bit harder to do guess and check. You can always do guess and check, but it takes longer sometimes. So for this first one here, we've got a prime number. It's 3x squared. So the only way to multiply to get a 3x squared is to do a 3x times an x. So if it's a small number or a prime number, then that's all you can do. This number is plus 1. Well, the only way to multiply and get a 1 is to do 1 times 1. So if this doesn't work, it can't be factored. And some things, can't actually be factored. My examples are being factored, but if you come up with something that can't be factored, you just write prime or cannot be factored. Check this. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 1 is 3x. 1 times x is x. 3x plus x is 4x. And 1 times 1 is 1. So that one you didn't have many choices. So if that didn't work, you'd say it cannot be factored. This next one here, we've got a 2a squared. The only way to get a 2a squared is to do a 2a times an a. And these don't have greatest common factors in them, by the way. If they do, you can always factor that out first to make it easier. And then to multiply to get a 3, you have to do a 3 and a 1. The question is, where does it go? Does 3 go here and 1 go here, or vice versa? These are both negative, so you're going to have a positive and a negative. So let's just, for instance, let's say we tried, well, let me just do this way. This is the negative here, so your bigger term will need to be negative. It's not always true when your coefficient's not 1. So if your coefficient's 1, then yes, that's true. But if your coefficient's something other than 1, then you pretty much just have to do it and check it and see. So we can try it that way and see if it works. 2a times a is 2a squared. 2a times 1 is 2a, minus 3a gives me negative a, and then negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. So this way works. If you had tried, let me go over here. If you had tried 2a minus 1 times a plus 3 first, then you would have 2a squared. 2a times 3 is 6a, minus a is 5a. So you can just cross that out and say, okay, no, that doesn't work. So these you can still do guess and check fairly easily. Like I said, though, for this, when you have a coefficient that's not a 1, you can't, like this one, it happens to be true. 3 is bigger than 1, so the 3 is still negative. But it's not always true because you're going to multiply by a number up here. So that's only true in the last video where the coefficients were always 1. Leading coefficients with your square term were 1. So then what do you do if you end up with like 16a squared plus 16a plus 3? So 16 is a little bit bigger number to work with. You can do 1 times 16. You can do 2 times 8. You can do 4 times 4. So you got more choices here. To get 3, you've only got a 1 and a 3. So, that choice is not too bad. But when you have more choices and stuff, there's a different way you can go about these that makes it a little bit easier in my opinion. So what you want to do is multiply your leading coefficient and your constant term together. So you do 16 times 3, which is 48. Then list your factors of 48. You're looking for the factors of 48 that will add up to this middle term. So 1 and 48 do not. And then you've got 2 and 24. Those do not. 3 and 16. 3 and 16 don't add to 16. You've got 4 and 12. 4 and 12 will add to 16. The other one you've got 6 and 8. These add to 16. That's what you want to find. So then what you do is instead you break up this middle term and use these two numbers. So you do 16a squared plus, we've got a 4a plus 12a plus 3. Now I've not changed it really, because if I put these back together, I'm back to 16a. All I've done is I've split up the 16a. So you multiply the leading coefficient and your constant, find the factors of whatever that is to add up to that middle term. And then you can factor by grouping. So out of the first two, I can take out a 4a, and I'm left with 4a plus 1. Out of the second two, I can take out a 3, and I'm left with 4a plus 1. And then I've got a 4a plus 1 and a 4a plus 1, and I'm left with 4a plus 3. And then you check it. 4a times 4a is 16a squared. 4a times 3 is 12a, plus 4a is 16a, and then 1 times 3 is 3. So in my opinion, instead of doing guess and check, you might have done 4a times 4a last, and then you'd have spent, 5 minutes trying to figure that out. My opinion is it's faster when you have leading coefficients that are bigger. It's faster to do this method and split it and make it a grouping problem. So like for the next one, you got 24x squared plus 34x plus 5. So for 24, you've got, lots of options to multiply to get 24. 5, you don't really have any options. There's 1 and 5, but still, it's hard to go through and figure out sometimes, the last one, you might have spent 5 minutes and then you've, spent a lot of time. So I find it easier to do it this way. If you still want to do guess and check, that's perfectly fine. As long as you come up with the right answer, I really don't care. I think this method's easier. So if you do 24 times 5, you get 120. Factors of 120, they need to add up to 34. So list your factors. You don't have to, if you can do this in your head, this is fine too. I just usually write them all down. So we need to add up to 34. So these add to 34. So then I'm going to split this middle term in two. So I'm going to have 24x squared plus 4x, and it doesn't matter what order you do it in, you can do it either way, plus 30x plus 5. So it's the same problem, it's just I've split the middle term into two pieces. So I can do, on the left side, I can take out a 4x, and I'm left with 6x plus 1. And on the right side, I can take out a 5, and I'm left with 6x plus 1. So then I can take out the 6x plus 1, and I'm left with 4x plus 5. And if you check that, 6x times 4x is 24x squared. You got 30x plus 4x is 34x, and then 1 times 5 is 5. So it does work. For our last one here, try again. For our last one here, this one, you don't have, I would do this one either way, because 6 is not that big. You can do 3 and 2 or 1 and 6. It's not too bad to figure that out. But just to show you another one on grouping, you got 6. And the y squared, it's fine. You're just going to leave it the same way. Like to get an a squared, you do an a times an a. To get a y squared, you do y times y. You could rearrange this if you wanted to. Make it a little bit easier. If you get more than one variable, it's fine. It's just you treat them the same way. So I'm going to do my coefficient here times this coefficient and show you another one of those just to show you. So 6 times -1 is -6. So to get -6, you got plus or minus. All these are plus or minus, but we got 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. So the question is, which ones will add up to a -1? Well, because you've got, let me just do a big plus or minus. All those plus or minus. So 2 times -3 is -6, but it'll add up to a -1. So if I do 2 and -3, they multiply together to -6, and they add together to -1. So that's what you want them to do. You want to multiply them to get them this, and then add to get this middle term still. So I'm going to split this middle term up into 6. I've got 6a squared, and I'm going to do, you can do the minus or the positive. It doesn't make any difference what order you do it in. So minus 3ay, and then plus 2ay. So I'm splitting this up using these as the coefficients over here. So split this using these. And then minus y squared, because minus 3ay plus 2ay is minus ay. So I've changed the problem a little bit, but not really. So then I'm going to do factor by grouping. So split it here. That's an A, not a 0, just so you know. You can take out a 3A on the left, and you're left with 2A minus Y. On the right, I can take it, this is a way too. On the right, I can take out a Y plus Y because I want it to be a positive and a negative. So plus Y, and I'm left with 2A minus Y. Then I'm going to factor out the 2A minus Y. And I'm left with 3A plus Y. So I wanted to do this one this way to show you how to do it. If you have a negative, like I said, you still do it the same way. If you multiply to a negative, that's fine. List the factors, then figure out which ones multiply to that negative. One has to be positive, one has to be negative. Then they have to add to that middle term. Same thing. And you can check this. 2A times 3A is 6A squared. Then you've got plus 2AY minus 3AY is minus AY, and then minus Y squared. So it does work, and if you just prefer trial and error, guess and check, that's fine. But sometimes this method is a little bit easier in my opinion.